July. I mean, it was just unbelievable how he was taking control of that entire room with all the prospects in there. I mean, he was the guy they were all revolving around. He's got a little bit of attitude about him, and I mean that as a compliment, actually. I think the Penguins need some of that. And, there's been a lot of speculation, and it's been driven by the Penguins that Kapanen could make this team coming out of camp. I mean, Billy Guerin came out and said, sure he could. He's that kind of a talent. It's possible. I still am leaning toward it being unlikely. I'm much more interested in seeing what Bo Bennett can do in October on a top six role than I am Kapanen. I don't think there's a need to rush Kapanen. I think he's going to be a very good NHL player sooner rather than later. And if you want to give him a look now, that's fine. But I don't think it's a necessity, and I think he'd have to have just an unbelievable camp for that to happen.
If you're looking at the whole roster and you're in the manager's seat, how much does Kapanen kind of threaten Bennett's future with the organization, with the team, and not necessarily the immediate future or anything like that going into this season or a camp spot just going this year, but it certainly makes them look a little bit more expendable if you're looking from top to bottom across your entire depth chart.
Well, yeah, that could be, although, when you look at their top six winger situation, I don't think I think they could manage having both of them around for quite some time, honestly. Kunitz is, I think, turning 35 this month. Dupuis 35. There are some real question marks there long term. Bennett, to me, is really one of the X factors of this team. We all know about his injury history, and he's had all kinds of unfortunate problems. In fact, he told me the other day what happened when he hurt his wrist in November against the Islanders. Everybody assumed he got slashed or got hit into the boards. And he said, no, I was just dumping the puck in at the red line. I just shot the puck, and I looked down, and something wasn't right with my wrist. Mm-hmm. So he's had the flukiest injuries.
See, but I will tell you about him. Is that concerning, though? Because, given all the injuries he has had, that's a routine play, and it's not even a hit.
Sure. He is injury-prone. That is concerning. And another thing about him, he's got great hands. He's a great passer. But he doesn't necessarily – or I should say he hasn't necessarily impressed me to the point where I say that's a no-doubt top six winger. I'm not sold on him yet. And I'm not saying he stinks. I see some of the talent, yes. But he needs to play an entire season, and he needs to produce. He really hasn't been that great of a goal scorer since he entered the league. And, I think the Penguins are willing to be patient with him this year. Number one, there's not a whole lot of options. And number two, they still like him. They like his talent, but I need to see more from him. Just far too inconsistent at times. And does Kapanen have a higher upside than Bennett at this point? Probably. I think that's a fair statement. I can tell you the Penguins were absolutely stunned that Kapanen was still available in the first round when they took him. They really thought he was a top 10 pick. So, and nothing I've seen from him would indicate otherwise. This is a really, really talented kid. So it'll be interesting to watch both of them in training camp. They're both certainly part of that top six storyline.
Well, I think the most encouraging thing that you mentioned is the way Kapanen carries himself, in the NHL locker room, just the way he's comfortable walking from place to place. That kind of body language really, for a young kid tells a lot, because I think, Bo Bennett, for as injury prone as he's been, I think what's held him back even more than that seems to really be mental. And I'm not talking about the way he understands the game or anything like that, but just the way he, psychologically approaches that game, whether it be going in the corners or being strong on the puck or anything like that. Kapanen, if he does have that element, if that puts him over Bo Bennett, I think that's really promising. And I wonder how much of an impact growing up, with, being Sammy Kapanen's son and really being in that environment since he was born has impacted the way he approaches the game and the rink itself.
I think that's exactly what it is. This is a kid who's been in NHL locker rooms all of his life. He's been around NHL teams all of his life. Yeah, I think that plays a huge role in it. I have no doubt that it does. And like I said, I was just blown away by how comfortable he was. And you're right about Bennett. Listen, if you're Bo Bennett and you're a 21-year-old rookie or whatever, and you're thrown on the line with Evgeny Malkin and James Neal, you talk about two people who are hard to play with on the ice, because those two guys were doing their own thing. They didn't really want to be bothered much. That's a very daunting thing for a guy like Bennett to be thrown into. And in particular, those two. James Neal wasn't always Mr. Personality, and Evgeny Malkin, I don't know how much he speaks to his teammates, but I mean, it's one of the best players in the world who frankly doesn't speak the greatest English in the world, and you're a 21-year-old kid who's, trying to fit in with them. That's tough. It really is. And I wouldn't say that Bo doesn't have confidence, because I think he does, but at the same time, would he defer to them and not shoot enough at times? Absolutely. And you're not going to see that from Kapanen, I don't think. And like I said, I don't think he's going to make the team, but it wouldn't shock me, because, listen, Billy Guerin's come out and said it, and Rutherford and other people have said, sure, this guy has a chance. He's that good. So it'll be interesting, and if he does make the team, I don't think he'll be, I don't think he'll shy away from big moments, put it that way.
I feel like a lot of the problems on this team in the past has been mentality, and to draft somebody like Kapanen, he kind of, I like to compare him to the anti-James Neal mentally. He seems incredibly mature for his age, and even first impression from the guy from the draft, they asked him, I think Michelle Curciolo asked him, what did it feel like to have all those boos kind of rain down from Philadelphia, and he's just like, it wasn't so bad. He just kind of plugged on and kind of went about his business, and, nothing seems to faze the guy.
No, not at all. And the Penguins need some of that. I had somebody in the organization last year tell me that Penguins locker room last season was the most quiet locker room he had ever been around in his entire NHL career, and that was coming from somebody who had been around for quite some time. Much has been made about the culture problems or the leadership issues. I don't know if there were leadership issues or not. I think that's probably unfair to Crosby and some of the veterans on the team. But sometimes you need that big personality, Mm-hmm. Sometimes you need the Kevin Stevens or the Ulf Samuelsson or the Max Talbot, guys like that. And I don't think the Penguins had enough of that last year. And I don't know if they acquired anyone who necessarily fits that mold or not. But there's nothing wrong with having those types, guys who are, not afraid to shake their room up a little bit. They're, to poke fun at Crosby a little bit, stuff like that. That's what Billy Guerin always did. He would look at Sid and say, just shut up, who do you think you are? And everybody would laugh, and it would lighten everyone up. Sometimes Sid needs that, I think. So, the talent alone was enough of a reason to draft Kapanen, but the personality absolutely does not hurt.
And, as well as anyone, 2008, 2009, it seemed like every day, you had someone else saying, man, it's just a fun room to be around. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to go to the rink every single day. And then last year, all of that disappeared. It seemed like it was just a void of morbid thoughts and sadness in the Pittsburgh Penguins locker room. And everyone,
I like how you worded that.
Yeah, it was not a pleasant place to be from all accounts that I've heard.
Well, the word I used last year a lot was joyless. It really was. You could sense it immediately, really early in that season, and I felt the fan base could sense it too. I spoke with so many fans over the summer, and every single one of them said to me, I didn't like that team from the beginning of the season. There was something about that team we just didn't like, and I heard it from everybody. And I totally understand what it was. I don't think there was ever a point during that season when anybody thought that was a legitimate Stanley Cup team, and yet nobody really knew why. But you just could kind of sense it, that there was an energy that was lacking in that team, a positive energy. That the 08 and 09 teams, remember the way they would just come storming out of the gates in the first period and just take control of games. The Penguins lost that. They were still a good regular season team, but they just didn't play with that kind of energy, and I think it was very evident, and I think Jim Rutherford's aware of it, even though he wasn't around this team last year. He made it very clear that, there was maybe some lacking, some character guys in the locker room, some big personalities, and he, made it clear that he wants to add some of those people. And I think Mick Spaulding, by the way, is a guy that will be very good in that regard. Of all the new guys I've met, his personality is just off the charts. Reminds me of Brandon Sutter a lot, which is a good thing.
Is Corsi, though? Come on.
Oh,
I think Spaulding's going to be great.
I haven't had a chance to joke with him about the whole Corsi thing yet. But, trust me, I know many in the blogger community are not real big on Spaulding because of the fancy stat problems. But I don't know. I like the guy, and I think his personality was very much needed on that team.
I completely agree with you, Josh. I think completely different circumstances where he was in Nashville, completely different system, completely different line mates. I think this will hopefully rejuvenate Nick Spaulding and make him feel his potential. Really, I think he's got enough talent to be on this team, first of all, and I think he just seems to have that, like you said, that attitude and that demeanor that we really need right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, you don't need the guy to go out and score 25 goals or something.
No.
Nick Spaulding, they want him to come in and score 15 goals and, hit people and kill penalties and be versatile and play left wing or right wing or center at times and be a good line mate for Sutter. That's all. And I certainly think he's capable of doing that. He's not a great player, but he's a good player, I think. He's solid. Yeah. And, when you look at what their third and fourth lines had last year, boy, they need a couple of guys like Nick Spaulding. So, no, I'm all for the addition, quite honestly. And like I said, just getting to know him a little bit in the last week or so, I think Pittsburgh fans are really, really going to like him. He just has a really great personality, and I think that will show very quickly.
Josh, I woke up this morning kind of irrationally excited about the start of the season already, and it's mid-September and kind of chomping at the bit. And in particular, I kind of got excited about Mike Johnston as the coach of this team. From what you've seen from this guy, does he seem to be the right fit for what this team needs right now?
Well, it's so hard to analyze him from an X's and O's standpoint. I didn't watch any of his games in Portland. I don't know what all he can do. I've heard nothing but good things about him, though, in terms of being a bench coach during games. He's an awfully nice man, I'll tell you that. He's going to be a player's coach in a big way. You meet him and you can't help but like him. Just a very modest, humble way about him. Is he too nice of a guy? I don't know. I mean, I expected the Penguins to hire more of a disciplinarian than they did.
Yeah.
When I met Johnson, I thought, man, this isn't the personality I envisioned at all. So we'll see if that becomes a problem or not. But I think he's a good coach. And it's funny, the more executives and people I talk with around the NHL, we look at Dan Biles when we say this guy's like the fourth best winning percentage ever, this and that. But a lot of people didn't think much of Dan Biles as a coach around the league, quite frankly. I don't mean to word it harshly, but the more people you talk with, the more people you find out said, he was an okay coach, but he wasn't a great coach. And maybe this guy will be just as good as Dan Biles, but if not better. I know he doesn't have, much of a track record at the NHL level, but I think he deserves a chance. And I will say this, to hear him talk about the game of hockey, I am expecting some very high-tempo, entertaining hockey from the Penguins this year. Mike Johnson hockey sounds a lot more like 6'5" than it does 2'1".
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what?
Marc-Andre Fleury is loving that.
No, he's not, actually.
No.
I don't think he is.
No. And you know what? Maybe this is really what the team needed. I mean, I think we all thought that disciplinarian guy was what this team really needed. But after hearing things like, the joy was kind of sucked out of that locker room, and it was the quietest locker room ever, maybe you need someone to kind of come in there and make it a little bit of fun and kind of recreate that atmosphere a lot. I don't know how Bosma got to the point where that locker room wasn't very much fun. I mean, you play Mustache Boy every month, and you seem to have all kinds of fun in the practices, but for some reason the joy was just gone. Maybe Mike Johnston brings a lot of that back. He seems like a nice enough guy.
He does, and honestly, I think the Philadelphia Flyers eliminated a lot of that joy. My feeling is that locker room was never quite the same after that series. Something happened in that series. The Penguins in 2012 really thought they were going to win the Stanley Cup, and for good reason. And they were humiliated, and I'm not thinking Biles should have been fired after that series. But, hindsight being 2020, maybe it would have been the right decision because there's something went wrong with that team. There's no question. And Johnson, we'll see. I mean, it's a new coaching staff, and if you want the whole disciplinarian thing, I think Rick Tocchet obviously is one of the reasons he was brought in was because he can play that role and he can control a Steve Downey and a Daniel Carcillo and add a lot to the coaching staff. Now, it's funny, I know Tocchet pretty well. He's the nicest guy in the world, so I don't know that he's going to be as much of a disciplinarian as people think, even though I'm sure he has that side to him. But no, that's to me why this season's going to be so much fun. We don't know what to expect. Mike Johnson might be a genius. I mean, seriously, he might be a great coach. Maybe he is. A lot of times in hockey history, guys pop up out of nowhere and they just turn into unbelievable coaches, and they were just in junior hockey and never really got a chance to show what they could do. So, the Penguins certainly like this guy, and